So I went to F&M this week for a Brothers War draft, and I drafted this deck that you see right here. And I actually wanted to make a short video just going over this deck because this is actually easily the most fun deck that I've drafted in the Brothers War. And I think it's a little bit of an unorthodox one because this is actually a mono-colored deck. This is mono-blue artifacts. It's been, I feel, a while since I've been able to draft a mono-colored deck that actually worked. This one, I didn't go undefeated. I went 2-1. The one loss was very close, but all of the games were super fun. So we'll go over this deck and also mention a few reasons why I think mono-colored for possibly any color in this draft format could actually potentially work pretty well. So the way I ended up drafting this deck was kind of by accident because I tried to stay open. I picked a few good blue cards and I was thinking, okay, I'll pick blue and then we'll add in another color later on when we get something that can work well with it. So I had some blue and some artifacts, but then nothing really came around to solidify being in another color, and eventually I just ended up with enough colorless and blue cards to make a mono blue deck. The card that I first picked is not even here. I think it might have been a third path iconoclast or something like that. So blue-red could have worked well, but I just didn't feel the need to play a second color. So I do have a 1-drop here, Combat Courier. I actually like this card quite a lot. You know, a 1/1 for 1. You can pay 2 and sack it to draw a card, but it has Unearth, so you can potentially get 2 cards out of your 1-drop here. I feel like this is potentially constructed playable. It would really need the right deck, but I do like this card quite a bit, and it did do work in this deck. I tried to pick low mana value artifacts fairly highly because I had 2 of this card right here. I actually drafted 3 of this, but I ended up cutting one from the deck, this Mightstone's Animation. I think this card is quite good, mostly because it draws you a card when it comes into play, but being able to turn one of your artifacts into a 4/4 is good. Typically, you want to make a Power Stone into your 4/4, but if that's not always available, then being able to buff up one of these can work well as well. So we've got quite a few 2-drops here. There's this Coastal Bulwark. I like this card too. In this deck, it's basically just a 3/3 defender for 2, which is pretty good, but then, you know, being able to surveil can help you smooth out your draws that way. This can work well even in a deck that doesn't play islands. Being able to play just a 1/3 defender for 2 that can surveil, that is not bad on its own as well. 2 Mine Workers. Usually I would not pick this card, but the reason I took it was to try and accommodate these Mightstone's animations, but this actually worked better than I thought it would, regardless of this interaction. Just having a 2/1 for 2, those stats are fine, but the gain life was pretty relevant as well. There were a lot of times where, you know, one of these might have gained me 4 or 5 life, which is pretty good actually. Then a few more 2-drops here. We've got a Zephyr Sentinel. I don't think I ever cast this, but this card is quite good. Played this in many drafts on Arena and whatnot before. 2/1 Flying Flash for 2, that's basically good enough on its own, but then you can also return one of your creatures to your hand and make this even bigger potentially. I do like this card quite a lot. Draftna was pretty awesome. It's pretty much perfect for this deck. Both of these abilities are very good. So 1 in a blue, you can return an artifact you control to your hand. So with things like Energy Refractor here, that's kind of a combo. You can use that to keep drawing extra cards. And then after you've returned something, you could pay 3 and tap this to copy an artifact when you cast it. So even if you run out of artifacts to cast, if you have one on the battlefield, this can just return it to your hand, recast it, copy it. This card, I think, is quite good for 2 mana. And a Thopter mechanic here. This card also is regardless of artifact synergy and, you know, putting the +1/+1 counters on this, it's just good on its own. A 2/1 for 2 that replaces itself when it dies. That's a good card. But this was able to grow pretty big, up to maybe like a 4/3 a couple of times. Burnished Heart here. It'll be decent in probably pretty much any deck, but once again, it's a low mana value artifact that can work well with this and work with all the other artifact synergies. Tower Worker, another one of those cards that's fine in pretty much any deck. It can, you know, help ramp you. It's a good defender. This one was one of the all-stars though. Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter. This card is quite good. I feel like I'm not sure if this is constructed playable or not, but it's got me wondering. So, you know, a 1/2 flash flying, it allows you to cast colorless spells and artifacts as though they had flash, so it's very similar to, I believe, Shimmer Mirror is the card that does this. But this can grow pretty big, actually. I believe I had this up to a 4-5 at one point, and being able to trigger this at instant speed is a pretty powerful effect because you can surprise your opponent with it pretty easily. It basically just always keeps them on their toes when they're trying to figure out combat math if you have any untapped mana and cards in your hand, because you could at any moment grow this. A couple of cards that I've got here in the 4-drop slot, but these are 2 of the prototype cards, so these could be way up at the top in 8 or 9, but the prototype version costs 4. Both of them are pretty good, I think. Spotterthopter, being able to scry and smooth out your draws is pretty powerful, and it's a decent-sized flyer. And Hulking Metamorph. I cast this for the 9 cost a couple times, actually, to make it a 7/7 that was a copy of something. I believe one time it was a copy of this, and another time it was a copy of this. So these cards both were very powerful. Precursor Golem, if you've played with it before, you know this card is awesome in Limited. It's 9 power and toughness among 3 creatures for 5 mana, which is a pretty amazing rate. It is possible to remove all 3 of these. Your opponent can do it kind of easily if they have any one removal spell, of which there are many for in this format. There's like Disenchant, any kind of red burn spell, there's Corrupt. There was 2 times that happened where my opponent used their removal spell that would have been perfect for this on something the turn before I played this. So there was one time when my opponent disenchanted this thing that was enchanted with Mightstone's animation, and then the next turn I followed up with this. And another game where my opponent corrupted something, the next turn I followed up with this. Both of those felt like I dodged a bullet there, but yes, Precursor Golem is very good. And it's cool also being able to have this enter as a copy of it and get you even more golems. And then the Suchi Cave Guard. I see this come around a lot in Arena on drafts. It is very good, but the thing is, 8 mana, it doesn't have prototype, so you just have to pay 8 mana for it, so it is quite a lot. But if you can get up to this, it is a very powerful card. 8/8 Vigilance with Ward 4, and then you get mana when it dies. Yeah, it's one where I have passed it many times in drafts, but in this deck, it did do quite a bit of work. So some pretty cool non-creature spells as well. Energy Refractor works well to draw a card, fix your mana. I don't need to fix mana in this monocolor deck. Works well with Thopter Mechanic to trigger that. Works well with Mightstone's animation. Aeronaut's Wings, I am a big fan of this card. I like to play 1 copy of this in most of the decks that I draft if I can grab one of these. Being able to give anything evasion as well as this bonus and power is quite good, and the cost isn't so bad either. 2 to play and 2 to equip, that's fine. Have 1 removal spell here in Weakstone Subjugation. Ideally, there would be some more removal, but in mono blue, you're kind of limited to what you have. So I did have this 1, which did do some work, but at the same time, I was kind of just trying to ignore what my opponent was doing and go over the top with flyers and big creatures, and that worked out pretty well. This card is awesome in a mono blue deck. Draw a card for each island you control and discard 2 cards. So 5 mana, kind of draw 5, discard 2 at instant speed is pretty good. Stern Lesson here is, another one of these card advantage cards. Can ramp you, but also one of the main reasons I was playing this was to accommodate Mightstone's animation once again, to be able to get a Power Stone early on, to be able to play this. The Mightstone's animation, I'm not sure if I would call this one All-Star of the deck, but it did do a lot of work. Maybe it wasn't All-Star, but as I said, I drafted 3 of these. I only ended up playing 2. Potentially I should have played all 3, but I feel like maybe I would want just a couple more low-cost artifacts in order to be playing 3 of this. We have seen cards like this before where it turns an artifact into a 4/4, but with this one, just the fact that it draws a card when it comes into play is very good. Had 1 counterspell here, Urza's Rebuff. I like this card quite a bit as a counterspell, just the fact that even if you miss the opportunity to counter something, or counter some key card that you're waiting to counter, you can still make use of this card by tapping 2 creatures. You can use that offensively or defensively, and I've done that both ways before, and it works quite well. So at common, I think this is a very good common counterspell. And then right here, Urza's Command. I mentioned this in my top 10 sleepers video. Uh, it hasn't shown up in Constructed yet. I'm not sure if it's going to, but in Limited, yeah, this card was awesome. Being able to scry one, draw one, and make the colorless construct token that grows depending on how many artifacts you have. There's so many artifacts in the deck, that token got quite big, so being able to do that at instant speed was pretty sweet. And this card also is another one that triggers Thopper Mechanic if you want to play this on your turn. For my lands, very simple. 14 islands, but then we've got these 3 non-basic lands right here. And that's something that I wanted to mention with this format, is that there are a decent number of colorless utility lands in this set, and if you're playing monocolored, it allows you to play basically every copy of those that you find, and these are quite useful. So there's this Tokaj's Dig Site. It's pretty good actually at a colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap it to surveil 1. That's not so high of a cost to be able to surveil. It's a little bit similar to like Castle Vantress. It's not as good as Castle Vantress, obviously, but it's similar. A couple of rare ones here. This Hall of Tagsin can get you a mana of any color, or you can pay 4 and tap this to make a Power Stone. It's pretty good with all this artifact synergy. And then a Blast Zone. This is a reprint that's been around for a while. Winnow Blast Zone is a good card, so if you can fit this in your deck, it's going to be good. So that got me thinking about playing monocolored with any of the other colors, and I think it actually would be pretty good. I have actually played against a mono red deck. Someone played that against me, and I lost. The mono red deck seemed pretty good, so mono red with some artifacts could work well. Mono white I think could be very good. There's a lot of mono white soldier synergy in this set. Mono black and mono green also I think would work pretty well too. So I think it's kind of cool with this set that you can play like mono anything with all these artifacts to support it and the non-basic lands, or you can play 2 colors of anything, you can play 3 color decks. It's cool to be able to draft a set with all these different options and not be forced into playing, you know, like this set of 3 colors or like a pair of guilds or something like that. Honestly, I could see a straight up colorless deck working even. So that was the deck that I played. As I said, it worked well, but more so than working well, it was just a lot of fun to play this deck. That's going to do it for this one though, so if you're still watching, thanks for watching. It'd be cool if you can like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. I'd encourage everyone to come join my Discord server. You can find a link to that in the video description below. And in the video description, you can also find my affiliate links for Dragon Shield in case you'd like to purchase any gaming supplies. You can follow those affiliate links and help with the channel while you do so. Also, if you'd like to purchase any Magic cards, you can get those by going to the sponsor of this channel, Face to Face Games. They're the largest Magic store in Canada, and if you use code 8th Place Dave at the checkout, you can save 5% on your order. Just a little note on that, the code doesn't work for items which are already on sale. I've had a few people contact me saying that the code doesn't work anymore, but that's because they've had a lot of sales recently, and if everything is on sale, then the code won't work, but it does work for any items which are not already on sale. And also, I'd just like to take a moment to thank all the patrons who support me on Patreon, but otherwise, I'll talk to you later.